here's my lovely wife. I want you to meet her, Connie. And this was taken not very long ago in Switzerland, where we got engaged. This is near Interlaken, Switzerland. We had the opportunity to return there recently, but that's where I asked her to marry me. And I kind of wowed her by the surroundings, and she ended up saying yes. And now we have a lot of grandkids. We have 6 grandkids, 5 boys and 1 girl. And I love being a grandfather. And if you've got young kids right now, just wait a while. The second round is really fun. It's pretty exciting. And then here's our 3 kids and grandkids together. My oldest son and daughter, who's the youngest, they both live in the Czech Republic. And then the ones over on the right, that's Caleb and Haley, serve in Albania. So all of us are rooted here in Europe, and all of my kids are serving Jesus. And I serve with an organization called Josiah Venture, which has a vision of a movement of God among the youth of Central and Eastern Europe that finds its home in the local church and transforms society. So just if you're interested in youth ministry and local churches, think about Josiah Venture, and there may be a team in your country that could help you, because we have staff in these 16 countries of Central and Eastern Europe, and all the way from Estonia down to Albania. We began with just 2 couples 30 years ago, and we have 370 in our team right now, working across this region to reach the next generation with the gospel of Jesus Christ and equip local churches to make disciples who make disciples. So that's a little bit of my context, but this is our topic: how to grow towards spiritual health and flourishing. And when I was thinking about this, I thought about something that happened to my mom, who still lives in Denver, not very long ago. She's almost 96. In 1 month, she'll be 96. And she was out behind her house not very long ago and was putting some things in the trash can and just leaned over too far, slipped, and went all the way down to the pavement. But because her hands were probably in the trash can, she actually went all the way to the pavement, and what stopped her was her face. And so that's, for 96, that's not very good. She laid there for a while and then realized she had her phone, and so said to Siri to call my sister, who still lives there, and found her nephew. And as soon as he found her, he took this picture of her. This is not a great picture. I'm sorry you have to even look at this. This was my mom after she put her face down onto the pavement. And so they took her to the hospital, fixed it up. We prayed and connected with her. And about 2 weeks later, she sent me this picture. It was starting to heal. This doesn't look very fun, does it? I'm sorry, I'm even have to show you this. These scabs on her face. And when she sent me this picture, I called her up and I said, "Mom, how are you doing?" And she said something really interesting. She said, "I'm really enjoying watching God miraculously heal me." Now that's a really interesting look at that face. She was looking in the mirror at that face, and her response was, "It's a joy to watch God miraculously heal me." And I was struck by that response. And I said, "Mom, tell me more." And she said, "I've just been reflecting on the goodness of God. I had my phone with me when I fell. I could have broken my teeth or broken my nose. It's amazing that how God put us together in such a way that can heal." And I think of other people my age, and they're in a nursing home, and I still have health. And she just went on about praising God in the midst of the circumstance and talking about God's greatness. And I was just reflecting, how do you go through difficult circumstances and end up in a place of actually blessing? And I don't think she was making it up. I'll talk a little bit more about her a little bit later on, but she always surprises me with her attitude. And we know that other people, when they go, even myself, when I go through difficult circumstances, that's not always my reaction. I often am beat down by things I'm experiencing, or don't know how to get above them. What makes someone able to take their burden and end up in blessing? And to understand that, it's probably good to start by asking what kind of burdens you're carrying today. So I've got a backpack here. I don't know if you can see this with the blurring, but I get up in the morning and I put this backpack on. And if you would look in my backpack today, let me tell you some of the burdens that I'm carrying. One of them is my wife has been sick for 2 years now. She caught long COVID and has not been able to travel with me, has very little energy, for a long section of time, she could only sleep 1 or 2 hours a night because her body was so in stress and under pressure. In fact, she hasn't been able to go to church with me in 2 years, so I go to church alone, which that's a burden for me. It's not just a burden that is one day, but I feel it every day. Another burden I'm carrying. Last weekend, some dear friends of mine earlier in the week called and said, Nicole just went to be with Jesus. And Nicole is their daughter-in-law. She's only 30 years old, and she was diagnosed with ALS, which is a terrible disease that takes away the ability of your brain to communicate with the rest of your body. And so I changed my plans, and last weekend I flew to Orlando and was at the funeral of a 30-year-old with two young daughters and a husband that's now left alone. And that's a burden. What do I do with that? I also, if you look in my backpack, this last week, I talked with two dear friends, both of them excellent Christian leaders who can't get along with each other and are probably going to part ways. They're partners in ministry and they really should be working together. And yet we can't seem to get things straightened out between them. And I think about this. Sometimes it's on my mind when I wake up in the morning or when I go to bed at night. And then this is similar probably to a lot of you. I have a lot of responsibilities. You saw that team of 370 in those countries. And, there are a lot of things that have to be done, things that aren't being done, problems that need to be solved, things that I wish were going better. And that sits in that backpack. And I wonder if we looked in your backpack, what you would find. Like if you would do an inventory of your backpack right now, what would be there and how is it impacting you? So I can tell you some about how those things impact me. I'm aware of them all the time. It's like you could look at me and not see them because they're on my back, but the weight is there. It takes energy to carry it. So it takes some of my energy every day. My body complains about it. Sometimes I'm stiff or have a headache or my eyes. You can see it in my eyes. It might affect the way I relate to you. You know what it's like when you talk to someone and you go, they're really not listening to me. Their mind is somewhere else. And I might be in a conversation with you and really thinking about my two friends who can't get their relationship sorted out, or what I'm going to do next to care for my wife's health situation, or the family in Florida that are such dear friends that just lost their daughter-in-law and their son now is without a wife. You might see that. It might take my brain and hijack it. And what should I do about that? Should I just ignore it? Should I just stand stronger? Should I push it down? Should I just say all this is good when it doesn't feel good? Should I just throw these things away and not care about them? But they really are important. I think that burden, how we bear that burden and what we do with it is not as simple as just a quick and easy answer. And before we go on, because this question is so important, I would like you to stop and reflect. And if you've got a piece of paper next to you, I want you to write down 3 burdens that you're bearing right now, and then 3 ways they're impacting. So just stop and do that right now. And if you don't have a piece of paper, write it down on your phone. But you need some burdens in mind as we're moving forward here. So I'll just give you a chance to do that. 3 burdens you're bearing and 3 ways that those burdens are impacting. So just do that right now. Okay, keep those in mind. And then I'm going to tell you something more that we need to be aware of. You're carrying some burdens, but the people you're shepherding are carrying a lot as well. In fact, burdens is a huge characteristic of our time. Take a look at this. This is in the United States, but this is the percentage of US adolescents and adults with a major depressive episode in the last year. And look back to 2005 to 2010. Everything's pretty stable, but then all of a sudden you see this uptick. And this increase from 8% to 20% of 12 through 17-year-olds, up almost at over 18% for 18 to 25-year-olds. Now, the older one's a little bit more stable. Now, it'd be interesting to say what's the inflection point right there. Actually, the inflection point is this little thing right here, the ability to be connected to the world through social media. We are bombarded with information that really tears us down in all kinds of ways. And it doesn't just tear down people, and this is the United States. Let's talk about Europe, the state of mental health in the EU. Now, before the COVID pandemic, at least 84 million people suffered mental health conditions across this region. This equals to more than 1 in 6 people. Well, that's a lot. 1 in 6 people, 17%. But let's fast forward from 2016 to 2023, and we find out now it's 1 in 2. Well, what an incredible change. Anxiety and depression were the most common mental health problems in the EU before the pandemic. But then you go on afterwards and you have anxiety disorders, different things like that. They revealed that 46% experienced emotional or psychosocial problems, such as feeling depressed or anxious in the past 12 months. So here's an infographic that captures that same picture. 46%. So not only are you carrying burdens, but the people you're shepherding are carrying more burdens than any time in the time that you've been alive. We're in a time that, in fact, there's a mental health tsunami, they say. There's a pandemic of mental health issues. And so one of the questions is how as we as shepherds, how can we lead people from burden to blessing, not just to survival, but to a place, actually a blessing? And is it possible? And what is the path? Again, you can see down here that young people are particularly affected by this, but all the way up to 35% of 55 plus year olds. And then in the left-hand side, you'll see that 62% of EU citizens think that the recent world events, COVID-19 pandemic, Russian aggression, unemployment, that all these are causing that anxiety. But think about this. If we have to solve anxiety by fixing those problems, we're probably in trouble, because those problems are going to be difficult to fix. So somehow we have to have a way of living in a world with significant problems and still staying personally healthy in the midst of it, and shepherding other people, so that we don't just have to change our environment, but there's a change that comes in us that brings us to a place of flourishing. That's the thing that we were talking about earlier in the beginning. And so what would do that? We could multiply the mental health professionals, and we probably need to do that. But those of us who are just shepherding, are there spiritual principles that can help us lead people from burden to blessing? So God's word offers you help in the form of ancient songs. And so songs, why do we sing? So the Psalms are about songs. Why do we sing? Well, songs engage both our emotions and our mind. And so the Psalms are designed to not just speak to our minds, but also to our emotions. Songs release things. They connect people together. They direct. But the other thing about songs is that songs pattern our souls. So this is why we sing songs over and over again. This is why children want to sing them over. That's why when we listen to certain kinds of songs, we feel differently or we think differently. They pattern our souls. And so one of my questions is, as you look at the Psalms, is not just the information of the Psalms, but what are the big patterns that the Psalms want to lay down in our souls that will change the way we respond to certain kinds of things that are facing us? Well, we're going to get to some of those patterns, but where do the ancient songs want to lead you? And Psalm 1 is the theme of all of the book of Psalms, and it tells kind of the inner picture. It's like a teacher who starts by saying, hey, this is the reason I'm doing this class. This is the reason that I wrote this book. Psalm 1 offers the entire theme. And this is what it says. It says, blessed is the man. So the Psalms want to take us to blessing. We'll get back to exactly what that is. This state that's it's healthy, but it's blessed. Wow, what would that be? Blessed is the man. And then it goes on and says this. It says, by the way, what is blessing? This is interesting. This word for blessing is the word esher, Asher, and it's only 44 times in the Old Testament. Sometimes when we think of blessing, we think it's the same as when we say bless you, but there's a different word for bless you. It's the word barak, 330 times. And some of you who are Hebrew scholars, maybe you'll get the right pronunciation of both of these words. But this is not the word like bless you. It's a word that's a state. The word, you can see that in English it's blessed and bless. In Hebrew it's esher and barak, different words. And this word esher means basically this. It could be translated to be happy, but it is translated we could describe it as the internal and external experience of the goodness of God. And by the way, these two words of to bless and blessed in Czech are different, and they may be different in your language as well. But think about the internal and external experience of the goodness of God, or happiness. What would it be like if you internally? So my mom, when she was looking at her face with those big scabs, she was internally experiencing the blessing of God. And she was also looking around her and externally experiencing that. She was saying, wow, I had my phone beside me. Isn't that a blessing? I have someone to call. Isn't that a blessing? There's the internal and external experience of the goodness of God. And then we read on, we find that there's a danger of false paths. It says, he doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of the scoffers. So there's some false paths as we think about responding to the challenges, our burdens that are ahead of us. One is godless counsel. We can stand in the way of sinners. We can walk in the counsel of the wicked. So there's a lot of advice going on about how to handle the difficulties that we face. Not all of it is from God. There may be some helpful things, but we have to realize that God's perspective is often different than just the advice that's given us from the world. And sometimes that advice can take us off course. It says that does not stand in the way of sinners. Well, there is sin. When you're under pressure, when you're under stress, when things aren't going well, a sin can be very attractive because it's soothing. Stand in the way of sinners. Why is this person standing in the way of sinners? Maybe he's hoping to be swept along because, wow, it's easy to sin by maybe going into something that would make us feel better, running to alcohol or running to immorality, or running to mindlessness, or running to anger, or running to bitterness. Things that feel soothing, they feel like they're or to punishing others or blaming others. Well, all kinds of sins that could temporarily feel like they're soothing our soul, but it's actually that's not the place we're supposed to stand. Or sitting in the seat of the scoffers. It's easy when things aren't going well to spend a lot of time complaining about it, to talk about how bad this is and how poor our government is, and how the people who are making decisions about the war in Ukraine are doing such a poor job, or how our church leadership is just not in line. And complaining actually often just spreads the problem rather than fixing it. But that's a nice place to sit, that seat of the scoffers. It feels good. So we can get pulled off the path towards blessing by godless counsel, or soothing sin, or sitting scorn. But then there's this command. He says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on this law he meditates day and night. Meditate is haga, and there's 25 occurrences. What does it mean to meditate? So sometimes we think, are we sitting cross-legged? Are we having music in the background? What's this word to meditate? And here's some of the ways that it's translated in English. It can be translated to moan, or to growl, or to utter. Again, some of these words in English may be different. To speak, to muse, which means to think over, to mutter. But it basically means it can be like a lion growling over its prey. Oh, that's how that word is translated in Isaiah 31:4. or to groan or mourn in distress like a dove. That's how it's translated in Isaiah 38:14 and Isaiah 59:11. And it also is translated utter or speak in Psalm 38. And so what does it mean? It means, or muse, it basically means to uh, to uh, let something go on over and over in your mouth. What goes on in your mind over and over? It's the pattern of your thinking. He says you pattern your thinking by going over and over again the patterns of the Word of God. And someone who does that, who delights in the law of the Lord, what we find right here, and runs it over and over till it patterns the mind like this, then that person is blessed, experiences the internal and external goodness of God. And then here, there's this promise. It says, he will be, the outcome is sure. So we know where this is going to end up. If he'll do these things, he's like a tree, or she is like a tree planted by the streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all he does, he prospers. Now, isn't this interesting that this experience of God's internal and external goodness does not require any change on the behalf of anyone else? And it doesn't require any change in the circumstances, which should be so freeing to us, because if mental health requires that those around us change and that circumstances change, we're going to be victimized by people and happenings around us. But it says he'll be like a tree planted by streams of water. So the source is right at him, not in any change in circumstances. It yields its fruit in season. So here's one of the things: in spite of external conditions, there's other passages that talks about the heat comes and this person is not afraid. So wow, I could experience I can have the internal, external experience of the goodness of God, no matter what's happening around me. And here's another thing: it yields its fruit in its season, in spite of the time it takes. Now, sometimes we think that there's an immediate outcome. So I meditate on God's word, or I put into practice his patterns. And sometimes there's a delay, like farming. You plant, and then there's a delay till you reap. And there's a delay sometimes in the blessing. But it says, even if there's a delay, even if the outcome is not immediate, it will be there. It yields its fruit in its season. And then here's the other thing: whatever in all he does, or all she does, he prospers. And this is just amazing. It doesn't say, and the man or woman who performs perfectly, they will experience the internal and external goodness of God. Or the person that knows everything or does everything right. It's whatever he does actually prospers, not just whatever he does perfectly or whatever he does better than everyone else, or whatever she does without making mistakes. This outcome seems to be very sure. So, wow, that's just an amazing promise, and it's dependent on this patterning that happens by meditating, and it can lead us to this experience in spite of external conditions, in spite of the time it takes, in spite of your performance. And here's my question: this is where we're going to go. What are the patterns that God's word is trying to build into our life? Because like if we were talking about music, what are the patterns of jazz? Or what are the patterns of Viennese waltz? Because it's not just the individual note, it's the thing that repeats over and over again, that we're able to repeat, that we're able to match that pattern in such a way that we don't get pulled off track by godless counsel, or by soothing sin, or by sitting scorn, but we end up in the internal and external experience of the goodness of God.